Okay, we might kick off. It's just on 11:30. So welcome everyone to our webinar today, Driving Success Through Automation. So how Codes transformed accounts receivable with Satori. Just like to introduce Pete Le Roux. Thanks for joining us today, Pete.
Yep.
Next slide, please. Pete's GM of Financial Shared Services at Coates, and also was an award winner last year for Credit Professional of the Year. So I found that one.
That's embarrassing.
And myself, Troy Nicholson, founder of Satori. So thanks very much, Pete, for joining us this morning.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So today we have a Q&A, we have a poll during this, we have a question and answer period at the end of the session. So if you guys have any questions you'd like to put to the panel, please feel free to enter those questions into Zoom. Also, we're having a poll during the session as well. The recording will be available after today's session if you'd like to have it to share with colleagues. And yeah, so let's keep it interactive.
Sure.
Thanks. So let's talk a little bit about Codes. A lot of you may be aware of Codes. It always fascinates me when I drive past those concrete bollards, thousands of them laying around down the road. But it was actually founded the business was founded a long time ago, 1885 in Victoria, I think right on the back of the gold rush period. And it's grown into the largest equipment hire provider in Australia, but I do believe that the company is diverse into engineering solutions and much broader than just hire. It was taken controlling interest in 2017 by Seven Group Holdings. I believe they initially took an interest in the business in 2008, but took controlling interest in 2017. And of course, Seven Group Holdings is the private business of Kerry Stokes and his which owns Seven West Media and those and Westtrack and those businesses. So over 200 stores around Australia, and what's interesting is they have a lot of on-site stores. So if you're a mining organisation or a large civil construction, you'd have a Coates store on site, and
tool stores are what we call them.
Tool stores, and I believe now that the trend is for companies not to own any of their equipment; they rather have it managed by Coates. So Coates has been a customer of Satori's for over 10 years. I introduced to the business through compliance originally, and extremely advanced in terms of the monitoring they're doing on a daily basis. So starting at AP, corporate cards, HR, timekeeping, payroll, fleet, and of course AR now we're talking about today. So just to maybe introduce Pete, maybe just give us the audience a brief background in terms of your role at Coates.
Yeah, sure. Coates has entrusted me to run the shared services team, which is just a fancy word for the accounts payable, the accounts receivable, and payroll structure. I'm very fortunate to have about 40 people work for me to service the business in all the aspects you can think of that relates to that. Very transactional, services orientated. Branches need to get their hire schedules out, and we make sure that they get paid. On the supplier side of things, we make sure everybody servicing us or helping us do what we do gets paid on time, and then we also have to take care of the employees. So there's a lot happening in shared. So I've been with the company now for 8 years, and it's a very dynamic environment. I mean, I've worked in telecoms and a lot of construction, but this industry is very unique in the sense that there's almost every day has a different challenge, which I personally like. Right? I like to keep my mind working and have different challenges every day. Yeah.
Great. And just on challenges, what was the major challenge with the AR process that you identified?
Oh, okay. So maybe just to give a bit of context, Coates does about 1,300, 400, give or take, disputes every month. And that could range anything between $5 to $10 million, depending on the size of the invoice. That's a lot of cash flow that's pending until you resolve the dispute.
So what's an example of a dispute?
Oh, you got the invoice, you got the price wrong on the invoice, or
Right.
you got the details wrong on the invoice. So when we send out those documents to our customer base, they would go, no, I can't pay this because you quoted me $50 a day and this thing says $80 a day. And then you have a dispute. Now, in the olden days, that would result in one of the accounts receivable officers flagging that invoice as a dispute, which would then, in our ERP system, create what is called like a register of disputes to be resolved. But it was from that point forward that it became very cumbersome for the team, the accounts receivable team, as well as the branches that we, engage with in terms of resolving these disputes, because if you're an accounts receivable officer and you're trying to recover the money and the customer says, no, I'm not paying that, you had to flag that dispute. And then in the old environment, we would send the dispute to a branch and go, customer XYZ doesn't want to pay that invoice because the price is incorrect. That would go into the branch manager's inbox. Now, we have about 21 people working in AR. So if you can imagine, if 5 of them send, 7 random emails to a branch manager on a day about 7 different customers, that branch manager, when he sits down at his desk, is going to get multiple emails dealing with disputes. So from a workload perspective, you kind of go, oh my gosh, that's just too much. From the AR perspective, you had to remember how to follow up on any dispute that was still pending, because this one was resolved by that manager, but this one is still pending with this manager. So from an AR perspective, you sort of keep chasing your tail, trying to get things resolved so that you can ultimately do what you're employed to do, which is, recover the funds and bring in the cash. Bring the cash in. And that has ripple effects into the company, because without cash, you can't pay your suppliers or do any of that sort of stuff. So yeah, we had to sit down and really think about what do we want. So we wanted accountability, and we wanted a better way of keeping control of our disputes. That's sort of what the problem was.
So the solution, you then went out and tried to find.
Yes.
Did you? So maybe just walk us through that process of how you came about.
Yeah. So I think what we realized is that from an administrative point of view, it was creating too much work for operations and for us. The second point we wanted to solve was we wanted to ensure that we have more of a helicopter view of what's outstanding and what's resolved. We wanted accountability, because we wanted to make sure that if we sent a branch a dispute to resolve, that it wasn't open-ended, because that directly impacts customer service. If you take too long to resolve the dispute, the customer, that's a bad experience. So from an experience point of view, we wanted to beef that up. And I think ultimately we wanted to start a process of not just reactively, reacting to disputes. We wanted to understand, why do we have these disputes? Where are they coming from? And you can't see that from a register or a spreadsheet that shows you, 3,000 unresolved disputes, because you wanted to know which branch, which region, what is the most prevalent dispute reason, because that would allow us to then do the second part of dispute management, which is proactively engaging the business as a value add department and saying to a regional manager, for instance, do you realize that branch X, Y, and Z has got the most disputes in your region? And that would allow them to kind of go, why? Because that branch manager is brand new. This one has never had training. And that sort of proactively, now you're addressing it from both sides, right? Stopping
the problem before it happens.
Yes. That's what we wanted to do. So we engaged Satori and we started a workflow process.
Right.
Do you want me to go into that for a bit?
Yeah, maybe briefly. Yeah.
Okay. So basically we helped get to a point where when you flag that dispute, it goes into a workflow process
Right.
where the dispute is channeled to the recipient party who's responsible for it. But I think the key difference is that instead of it being several messages during the day, we kind of collate it so that if a branch manager has, let's say, 10 disputes to deal with in a day, they don't get 10 separate emails. They get one email at a specific time of day
Yes.
with all the disputes on it. So now you have a central point that you can focus on. You don't have to look for the 10 emails. It's right there in front of you. You can resolve it right there, and it chases you. So that was the second bit. From an AR perspective and from a branch perspective, one of the key challenges we had is remembering to go back and solve that dispute and remembering who gave you answers and who did not. So the solution we've implemented chases you up after a couple of days and say, hey, you still need to give us an answer on this. And so from that perspective, what happened is we shortened the time frame of resolving disputes because there's now something tapping you on the shoulder going, remember to get back to Pete about that dispute.
There's oversight.
Yeah.
Oversight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Cool.
And I guess moving on to more of the benefits, you spoke about better cash flow. I mean, is there any other major benefits that the business is seeing? I mean, executive level, do they recognise that there's been an improvement in this area?
Yeah, I think since we've implemented the process, we've noticed a couple of benefits. I think the most obvious benefit is workload. Like I mentioned before, both the operations side and the accounts receivable side is much happier because it's a little bit more focused in terms of addressing disputes. The accountability side of it, because we have the workflow process and SLAs attached to every dispute type, like we want you to at least solve this dispute in 7 days, has resulted in the average time of disputes reducing. I think when we started, we had the average days at about 48. It's now 22. So that's a massive leap in terms of customer experience. So that's ultimately where I'm getting to.
Yeah.
So it's cash flow, customer experience, administration and workload, and then ultimately visibility. The tool allows us to take a step back after, let's say, a year's worth of data and start having strategic sessions about where is the root causes, what are the root causes, and that helps the business proactively manage that.
Right. And I think, just the customer side is something, would there be things like stock credit issues around because they've got disputes? Is that something that would happen with them?
No, not as much, because I think from an accounts AR's perspective, if there is a dispute, until we feel we've appropriately dealt with the dispute, and you're still refusing
that's outside
to play ball, that would be outside. So we wouldn't enforce any payment terms then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the issue could be that you could have customers that just continually dispute invoices just to.
Yeah, that is a trick in the book. Yeah, we know.
So just moving on to, so I think what's really important for these webinars is that we're giving some takeaways to the audience in terms of that solved your problem, but what if there's a similar problem? Oh, sorry, before we do that, just going to run a quick poll.
Sure.
Before we do that. So just everyone out there, just please answer this poll. You'll see it come up. Is email still being relied on for internal communications in the AR and AP processes? So I'll just give everyone 20 or so seconds to answer that poll. So, wow. So people still responding.
Lots of yeses.
So there's a few no's. No's are coming back. But look, based on those results, look, still, 70 over 70% of the audience still has AR an email process in AR, and I think Pete's just described that can be a bit of an Achilles heel.
Oh yeah.
So so maybe there's opportunity out there for to improve because of, you know, at the end of the day, it's cash flow and customer satisfaction, which is potentially suffering because of this manual process.
Yeah, and you know, it takes up everybody's time, and then they lose the ability to add value to the business because the majority of their time is, you know, stuck in emails and follow-ups and stuff like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're going to give everyone some takeaways. So
Okay, go for it.
So the takeaways, I mean, the first big one we spoke, you and I chatted before
Yeah.
the session was this one. I mean, maybe expand on the perfection. So it's like I guess when we think of solving a problem, we might go to IT, we might talk to our colleagues.
Yeah.
They might now this little point problem you have in the business now turns into we're not doing anything because we're upgrading SAP or we're upgrading Oracle or we're buying a new payroll system. So nothing ends up happening.
Correct.
So, and that's also, I guess, you know, the 80-20 rule in terms of, you know, if it does 80% of what you want, then maybe it's worthwhile considering
Yeah,
going
you're
forward.
right. I mean, this is exactly what we experienced. We started wanting a dispute workflow system with a dashboard attached to it, and
Yep.
we found ourselves having lots of people and lots of opinion, which you should do, by the way. I mean, you should consult your stakeholders in terms of what they want. And
Yep.
we went out to the branches and said, hey, if we did this, would you like it? Would you hate it? But yeah, be vigilant in terms of remembering what the core problem is that you want to solve, and remember that you're not going to resolve all of the problems in every situation. Specifically with us with disputes, our disputes were driven by 3 major types of disputes.
Okay.
And we said if we can only fix that plus all the admin, that would be in a much better position that we wanted to be in. But if you listen to the customer service stakeholders and the branch stakeholders, they all want add-ons to it, which is great. You can do that, but don't try and do that all at once because you'll build a system that's bigger than Burn-Her, and then the cost blows out. And then when you go to the ELT and you go, can I get X dollars of money? You started with this much money and now you got that much money, and that's very hard to ingest from an ELT point of view, because trying to sell them, let's say, a $500,000 project, you know, through a business case and stuff, makes it uncomfortable. You struggle to visualize it. So 80-20, it's the old bite-sized chunks sort of approach.
Sure.
And that's what we did here.
And that moves on to the next point, which is start small. I think, I think at that point of everyone piling in something that's turns into a small point requirement, then you start trying to solve other issues around the business.
Yeah, I get this question a lot, and what I say to people who's embarking on this sort of similar journey is look, I've been with Coates for 8 years, right? So I've done a number of projects, so I've got great support from my ELT when I bring a solution and they go, okay, we're listening to you. But when you're not in that position, when you're still building your credibility in terms of what you want to implement, when you go into a room or you write a business case and you want to convince them, sometimes it's better just to get your service provider, the people you're partnering with, and build a proof of concept.
Yep.
You know, if there's 10 issues, just focus on 2 of them, and you can build a model at a minimal cost. I'm talking fractional of what the bigger solution is, and just show them what the difference is between doing it the proposed way on those 2 things. And you will be amazed about how that real-time, factual data speaks volumes when you start trying to convince them to
invest
the bigger thing. Because now you can say, imagine if we this is the results we achieved on 2 of the 10 problems. Imagine what we can get if we do the other 8. And that's very powerful.
Yeah.
Because that does not just show the benefit from a like, let's say, operating cost transactional point of view. That also shows the other side of the business, the operational side of the business, what's in it for them. That's a key point, right? I always say to people, I'm in finance, right? So people doing projects in finance tend to think about the benefits for finance, you
Right.
know, overheads and less costs and efficiency, but you got to try and also say to the other executive team members, what is the benefit of this for your team? And one of the benefits in this specific project is your branch manager will have less to do.
Yep.
You know, he can focus on what he's there to do, you know, renting out gear, fixing gear, all of that stuff, instead of sitting in front of a desk.
Yeah.
And that to them is go, right, let's do that, because that will make my team happy.
Yeah, because one of the big barriers we find, trying to partner with customers is that it's sometimes easier, it's much less riskier not to do anything.
Yeah.
I think people, IT projects can be risky, and people are petrified of not going well and collapsing and getting egg in their face. So
yeah, that's sort of a combination of the two, right? Because if you make the project too big, it stalls.
Yep.
And like you said, if you have a smaller concept, you negate the risk of the fear that if you push out this big solution and it doesn't work, how's it going to look? Because you have an opportunity to prove it to yourself as well.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So fail early. Yeah. So okay. And then another big thing was what happens once you've built this beautiful system and everyone's high-fiving each other? The work's not over, is it really?
No. I have personal experience, and this is one of my lessons as a manager as well. Never revisit whatever solution you have implemented and think it's done. Let me just park it and move on. We operate in an environment, technologically speaking and otherwise, that evolves constantly. So having a system, whatever system it is, make sure there's somebody that looks after it in your structure and tweaks it. Because if you don't continuously adjust to be applicable to the situations as it is today, what happens normally is, before you know it, your system is not working as it should. That goes to it start losing credibility.
Yes.
And as soon as it started losing credibility, people start working around it.
Yeah. Go back to emails.
Yeah, and then before you know it, you're back to a process that you didn't want to do in the first instance. Yeah. So that's a very important point that you put there. People need to remember that that's putting it in is the first phase, maintaining it is the second. Because
we often find that in organisations where people move on, either to a different role, to a different organisation, and that was Pete's system he put in, and maybe he's not well handed over, not well understood. They haven't got the pain from knowing what it was like before the system, and then maybe the cracks start appearing because it hasn't got adequate ownership, hasn't got adequate support, and then we find that the system can fall away, and that's really why we've moved more to a managed service type offering for our product, because it does give that support and does give that technical support for the organisation when people do change roles or move on.
Yeah.
I think in terms of the content, we're going to move on to, if anyone's, thanks very much, Pete, for that. There's some great insights there, but so I'm not sure if there's any questions there. Mark Wilcat's going to help me if there's any questions from the audience.
Yes. Hi, Troy. Hi, Pete. Yeah, just listening in. So we have had a couple of questions, and I'll just encourage people to add some more if they come to mind. I think there's a question around accounts payable. So basically saying, Pete, have you experienced or implemented similar type solutions within the accounts payable space, or any insights in terms of how you've done things in that area?
So a very, very good question. I think anybody who's in the accounts receivable and accounts payable will know that's very similar environments. So as a result of the project we did in disputes, we actually mirrored it. We went and applied that to supplier rejections as well, because I know for the people who work in accounts payable, they are normally subjected to the business around them having to, receipt the goods before they can pay the invoice, or ensure that there is a proper purchase order on the invoice before you can pay it on behalf of the business.
Sure.
That's a very similar environment to, I can't pay your invoice because you didn't get the price right. In their world is, I can't pay the supplier because you didn't raise a purchase order. I don't know if this is a valid invoice or not. And that similar environment of sending that invoice to your branch saying, did you order 5 bags of, printer paper, right? Can be facilitated in a similar process of a workflow that goes to the person who ordered the goods, making sure they raise the PO or receipted, chasing them up if they don't. And then I say high level after a couple of months, seeing where does the problem really sit. Yeah, absolutely.
The next question I have is, I assume from somebody from compliance, where do you see the benefits from a compliance point of view using this process?
Okay, well, so obviously, in terms of accountability and making sure we remind people that they have a dispute, part of the higher level analytics of the data of seeing where are these occurrences more prevalent, where's the problem areas.
Sure.
You can obviously drill that into who are the problem people that don't want to follow process, and that's where you have a compliance element where you can say, okay, Mr. Regional Manager, these 5 guys in your team constantly don't do what they need to do. What is the reason for that?
Okay.
Sometimes it's because they didn't get sufficient training when they started, or they don't understand the process, or on the odd occasion there's somebody who doesn't want to cooperate. But that's how you see the benefit from a compliance perspective, for sure.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just the last question, I think we did answer it. So is the session being recorded? Can we share links? I know the answer to that is yes. That's all I had from the audience, Troy and Pete.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for helping on that. So look, that's now come to the end of our webinar. So thanks again, Pete, for your insights. I think some great takeaways there for everyone, and yeah, thanks to the audience for attending. If you've got any questions, please feel to reach out to our team through that email, or know who your account managers are. Reach out to them. But thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you.